logging and monitoring. In order to be able to make accurate, informed decisions about how you want to manage the various aspects of your checkpoint security, you will need to know exactly what's going on with your network traffic. And that really should go without saying. I mean, it should be pretty obvious that in order to make good decisions about where you should be going with your checkpoint security, that you need to understand where it's all at right now. So in this video, we're going to talk about logging this network traffic and monitoring the connections live as they're happening. So the first thing we're going to take a look at in this video is the logging of general traffic. And truth be told, it's probably the most important area to understand, since as a firewall administrator, this is going to be something that you need to be really familiar with, since how could you truly know that something isn't right if you don't know what normal day-to-day traffic looks like? Now, in order to view our checkpoint logs in real time, we'll need to fire up the SmartView Tracker application. So I'm just going to duck down to my desktop here. We'll double click on SmartView Tracker and we'll enter in our password. And let's just expand this full screen. So this brings us into the SmartView Tracker, where at the top here we've got 3 tabs with Log, Active and Audit. And this is also where logs will be displayed when, in the rules you create, you choose to write events to the log. So if we go back to our Smart Dashboard here, over here in our security rules, which we've created in earlier videos, in this track column, when we choose log, those logs will be created here. Now, the default tab here in SmartView Tracker is this log tab, and this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time, since this is where you can get a running view of what's happening with Checkpoint, both right now and as well as what happened half hour ago, for example. It's this view that will allow you as the Checkpoint administrator to make sure that Checkpoint is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, such as if your rules are actually working. Now, it helps troubleshoot any problems or security issues you might have, and it also helps you generate reports which you can use to analyze your traffic patterns, such as how many HTTP connections you're getting as opposed to how many FTP connections. Alright, so let's have a little poke around in this console here, because it is pretty important. Over on the left hand side we can see this Explorer style window on the left, and we've got a couple of folders here, predefined, and down the bottom we have custom. Now obviously this predefined folder is what contains all of these predefined categories of events that have been logged. And at the bottom, the custom folder is where we can create our own filters and then only show specific events. And it's really kind of like the Windows event log, in that all of the events come into our log, it's picked up by this console here, and then based on the various filters, it's shortened down into each of these different views. So you could use the predefined ones, which are going to cover most of what you want anyway, or you could create your own custom one. So at the top, and I'm not going to go through all of these by the way, since it's pretty obvious what they do, you can see here it defaults to all records, which, as the name suggests, shows all of the events that have been happening within Checkpoint. Now, this can get pretty long on a production firewall, so when I want to come into SmartView Tracker and take a look at what's going on, personally I prefer to use the second option here, Firewall, since this will only show me what's happening specifically with the firewall, and it won't show me any of the events from any of these other categories. Now, to open up a category, by the way, you will need to double click on it. A single click is only going to select it. So let's fire up our firewall category, and you'll note that with all of these categories they all look the same. The only difference is going to be what sort of data we're displaying, whether it's regular firewall data, whether it's VPN traffic, quality of service traffic, web filtering events, and so forth. Alright, so on the right here, let's go and take a look at a sample event. Here we can see all of the events that we've logged, and at the top here we can use these up and down arrows in the toolbar to go to the top of the list or to go to the bottom of the list. So let's go to the bottom of the list, since this is where it'll show us the latest events. In fact, let's go and open up Internet Explorer, and we'll head off to, say, msn.com, And now if we go back to our Smart View Tracker, and we'll click on this down arrow icon again, you're going to see a whole bunch of green events in our list. And this, of course, is the result of CheckPoint logging those connections to msn.com. However, if we quickly go back to our IE window here, and let's change HTTP to HTTPS, which wouldn't work anyway for MSN, but more specifically in my CheckPoint rule base, I actually don't have a rule to allow HTTPS. So regardless of whether or not msn.com does allow HTTPS connections, this request shouldn't get past my gateway anyway. So let's hit enter there, and we'll leave it going even though that's going to fail. We'll go back to Smart View Tracker, and we'll click this down arrow icon again. And right down the bottom, it is in red. I've just select one above it so you can see that it is in red. We can see this dropped event displayed in red, which is for our HTTPS request. So far, even these basic requests can show us, the CheckPoint administrator, what's going on with our network. So let's take a closer look at one of these events though. Let's take a look at the bottom one, the one that just came through, which is our dropped HTTPS request, since it's obviously our most recent event. So starting from left to right, we've got the event number, we have the date and time that this event occurred. This little brick icon here simply tells us that this was a firewall event. Pretty obvious really, since we're here in this firewall section right now. But when you are looking at the all records section, then this icon here might have a little bit more meaning, since you're likely to see a lot of different icons in that view. Alright, next we can see that the product that this event here came from was VPN1 on its first network interface. The gateway that generated this event was our LA gateway. Our action was to log it here. We dropped the packet, so this connection wasn't able to go outside our network. Of course, it was an HTTPS connection. It came from this server, which is our Smart Center server that I'm on right now. The target IP was this one here. It was a TCP packet, and it was blocked by our fourth rule, the cleanup rule, which we can see over here. Now, this is important to know how to find out this information, since you may have times where you're expecting a certain result, such as a connection to fail or succeed, and it might not be working the way you intend. So let's say that I've written a rule to allow HTTPS packets through, but it was blocked like this one was. Well, when you come and check out Smart View Tracker like we're here now, we can clearly see why this packet didn't go through. Rule number 4, which is our cleanup rule, stopped it. So let's go back to our Smart Dashboard, and here in our security rules, you'll see that in our first rule here, we're not targeting HTTPS. Our second rule here does allow for any service, and that would include HTTPS, but in our destination field, we've specified connections to the gateway only, and of course our HTTPS attempt was to msn.com, not our gateway. Now rule number 3 here is allowing HTTP, but not HTTPS, so that leaves rule number 4, which matches any protocols going anywhere, coming from anywhere, and of course this is going to match our HTTPS attempt. And of course, the resulting action is to drop that traffic and to log it, which is why of course our connection was dropped and logged into Smart View Tracker. Now another thing we can do here in Smart View Tracker is to view active traffic, that is connections that are currently active on our firewall. You see, these connections that we've looked at here, they've all occurred in the past. Now they might have only occurred a few seconds ago, but they're still from the past. But if we switch over to our Active tab, we can see connections that are in use right now. Now the first thing you'll notice that when we do hit this Active tab is this message we're going to get here telling us that this tab will affect the performance of your gateways, since data needs to be continuously streamed from these gateways to Smart View Tracker. So this isn't something that you're going to want to leave on, rather you're only going to want to use it when you're troubleshooting. So we'll click Open, And you can see there's not really a lot of data here to look at right now, mainly since I don't really have anything that's actively going through my gateway. So let's fix that. Let's go to Internet Explorer again. And I'm going to head off to office.microsoft.com because I know there's going to be some files that we'll be able to download from this site. Alright, well I've just gone ahead and I've located the page where we are able to download the Office 2007 Service Pack 2, which as you can see is almost a 300 meg file. So that's going to give us plenty of data to work with. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start downloading this file. But before we do that, let's go back to Smart View Tracker. And I'm going to turn auto scrolling on, which is this downward pointing arrow icon here. Alright, well now let's go back to Internet Explorer and we'll start downloading this file. And we'll just save it to the desktop for now, and we'll go back to Smart View Tracker. And here you can see that we've got quite a few active connections taking place. Now obviously in a live corporate network you're likely to see a lot of connections pretty much at any time, since there's likely to be somebody doing something. But what we're doing here is at least going to give you a live look into the firewall to see what's happening right now. That's pretty useful if you suspect wrongdoings are going on right now. Well, here is where you're going to see exactly what's happening. In fact, if you do suspect wrongdoings and you want to terminate this connection immediately, then all we need to do is select the connection from the list. We'll select one of these, and then from the Tools menu, we could choose to block the intruder. Now this is going to bring up another window here where we're able to specify if we want to block all connections with the same source, destination and service, or just from this source or this destination. Now we can choose to block indefinitely or just for a specific amount of time if we think the problem's going to pass shortly, or we can choose to also block only for this gateway or for any of them. Well, I'm just going to click OK here, and instantly you're going to see that our download here has been terminated as these packets are simply not getting through anymore. Now, if we no longer need this blocking service to be active, to clear this block, we can select our Tools menu again and then choose Clear Blocking. Alright, well, our final tab here is the Audit tab, and I'm not going to save any changes here. And this is where we have an audit log of what changes have been made to our gateway, such as what policies have been changed, or policies that have been installed, and when administrators have been logging on or logging off. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this since it's the same sort of log as we've been looking at before, but in here you're just going to find a working log of who did what with regards to your CheckPoint systems. Now, while we're still on the subject of logging, let's head over to our Smart Dashboard again. And I'm going to double click here on my gateway object. And if I expand logs and masters and then choose log servers, you can see over here what servers are configured as log servers. And by default, it will be the first Smart Center server you installed. Although we do have the option of installing our logs on the local gateway, which in this case would be the LA gateway that we're looking at right now. At the bottom here, we've also got the ability to specify a different server when our primary one isn't reachable. So you could click Add and then choose from any other log servers that you might have in your network. And regarding the logging itself, if we click on Logs and Masters, you'll note that we've got a lot of different options for configuring our log files. We can perform log switching when the size of our log reaches whatever value you specify here. And log switching, by the way, is really just a fancy name for starting a new log file when the current one reaches whatever size you've specified. And by the way, if you don't choose anything here or you don't use this option, then the default is that CheckPoint will switch logs when the size reaches somewhere around the 2 gig mark, which is the maximum file size. Now we could also schedule this log switch to take place as well if we like, or we could perform a manual log switch in Smart View Tracker. In fact, if we go back to Smart View Tracker, over here in the File menu, we could choose Switch Active File. And if we just click OK here, then this will just roll over to a new log file using the default name. But if you like, we can uncheck this box and we could enter in a new name of our choosing. So I'm just going to leave it checked. We'll click OK and you can see we've saved the old log and then a new one's going to be created. Okay, well let's go back to Smart Dashboard, and here in this disk space management section, CheckPoint will measure free disk space in megabytes, but we could change that to a percentage if we like. Now, why this is important is that CheckPoint will stop logging if there's not enough disk space. So here, we're able to set up something called cyclic logging, whereby we're able to delete the oldest logs first to make space for the new ones. So if we enable this option here, this defaults to requiring us to have 45 meg free, or else we're going to be deleting old log files. Now we could also elect not to delete log files that are within a certain time period as well if you like. But the trick here is to make sure that you have enough disk space, and if we click the Advanced button, this will give you the option of running a script before CheckPoint deletes the logs. So you could use this feature to send those logs elsewhere before deleting them. But we do have another option to do that elsewhere, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, by default, we'll get CheckPoint to generate an alert when disk space is below 20 megabytes. And that's going to default to being a pop-up alert, but we could use any of these other alert types if we prefer. And finally, we can also choose to stop logging if our disk space drops below the value you specify here. And right down the bottom here, we can also choose to reject any new connections when a situation arises that prevents us from saving our logs. Now, if we click on additional logging configuration, I did mention we have this log forwarding option where we could forward our log files to another server, and we could also do that on a scheduled basis if we like, and even perform log switching, or in other words, we could stop the current log and start a new one and then copy the old log to the remote server. In fact, we actually do have one more method of backing up our log files, although it's not really marketed as a backup solution, more of a method of taking log files from CheckPoint for use in other applications. And I'm referring to exporting the logs using Smart View Tracker. So if we were to quickly switch over to Smart View Tracker, and let's go back to our log tab, and here in our firewall section, we can see we have some data in there. So if we now go up to the file menu and choose export, and we'll need to give this file a name, I'm just going to call it my log, and that'll be saved as a text file, so we'll click save. And now if we go and locate that file, and we'll open it up, in here you can see the contents of our log. So that's another useful option that you should be aware of. Alright, well another thing I want to talk about in this video is monitoring, and for that we're going to head over to Smart View Monitor. So we'll go off to our desktop and we can double click on our Smart View Monitor icon, although we don't really need to do that. For those of you that don't know this trick, if you're already logged into one of the other CheckPoint applications, and let's just fire one up here, then you can just jump straight into one of the other CheckPoint applications by simply coming up to the window menu and then choosing whatever you want to log into. In this case, it will be Smart View Monitor. And you'll notice that since we're already logged into one of the other applications, this means that we don't have to enter in our username and password again. Our credentials are simply passed along. Alright, well, this is Smart View Monitor, a place where you can get some real-time data about what's going on with CheckPoint in terms of our traffic, system counters, tunnels, remote users, and you can also find out how your gateways are doing. So at a glance here on this opening page, which defaults to showing all of my gateways, you can see here my Smart Center server as well as my LA gateway. There's the IP addresses of both machines. They're both listed as being okay and functioning properly. The CPU usage is almost non-existent since this is a lab, but obviously in a production environment, you'd be seeing these values obviously going up and down. There's the amount of virtual memory that we're using, the amount of free hard disk space we have, and what version of the CheckPoint software we're running. Now if we select either of these from the list, in fact let's select our LA Gateway. Down here you can see a little bit more information about whatever you selected at the top. You could identify things such as what policy's been installed on this gateway, and that's pretty useful to know since you might have built several policies over time, and knowing which one's actually live on your gateways is important, so you can find that out right here. Now we also have these hyperlinks here, which is going to allow us to find out more information. In fact, we've got some hyperlinks here as well. This will let us find out more information about what our system's running, the network activity, and the licenses. And if we click on the More hyperlink, we can get some more information about the various components within our firewall. Now these things here though, there's not really anything for you to do in here. This really only serves the purpose of providing information about the gateway or the service that you have. But I would recommend that you take a look in here and become familiar with it, because it will tell you what's going on with your CheckPoint hardware. So over on the left hand side here you can see the things that we can monitor. We could monitor the traffic that's going through our firewall. We have system counters, which are really a lot like the system counters in the Windows Performance Monitor console, where they allow you to monitor the performance of your network interfaces, your memory, your CPU, and so forth. Well, here we've got exactly the same thing. We've got system counters for monitoring disk space and our CPU usage and so forth. Now we can also monitor here VPN tunnels, remote users, and something called cooperative enforcement, which is when we use CheckPoint integrity servers to enforce policy-based security for remote and internal computers. So let's take a closer look at one of these, and let's choose the first option here. We'll go into the traffic section, since this section here, and probably the second section here, system counters, they're likely to be the two that you as a CheckPoint administrator are going to be interested in. So at the top here you can see we've got options for our top services that are currently in use on our CheckPoint systems, the top quality of service rules, the top destinations, and that's a good one, top destinations. You could use that at any moment to find out where your users are going, what the most popular places are at any given time. In fact, let's take a look at that. We'll click that one, and over here on the right it's going to throw up a new window where we can choose what interface we want to take a look at. Now we could choose to use, or rather to look at, only external interfaces, or we could simply select one from the list. So let's select one of our interfaces, we'll click OK, and that's going to fire up our report. Now obviously I don't have a lot of data here since my system is pretty much idle, so let's go and generate some first. So firstly let's go and open up a command prompt, and we're going to ping, say, Google's website, if I can spell it, and we'll hit enter there. And back in Smart View Monitor, you can see these graphs here are changing to represent the traffic that's going on right now. Now, since my ping here is going to show up and it's going to disappear quickly, one thing that I could do here to keep it on the graph is to issue a continuous ping, or I could simply use this freeze feature here to lock my graph in place. So let's go and do this. Let's add in a -T to our ping, and we'll hit enter there. And behind here you can see that our graph is changing. We've got our ping traffic causing, well, it's only really a minor blip here in the middle on our graph, but it is there. And now if we click on this little pause icon here, which issues the freeze command, we can then freeze this graph in place, and we can see exactly what traffic was passing through our firewall at the moment we froze it. And that's useful because there are going to be times where you want to take a look at what's going on with your traffic, or what sites are popular, and since things can change in an instant, freezing the graph can help. Now the other thing that you can do here in Smart View Monitor is to block connections. Now if you notice that there's a connection that, say, it might be going to YouTube for example, and it's chewing up all of your bandwidth, well, you could block it from here, just like we did in Smart View Tracker. So if we were to right click here on our Google ping graph, then we could choose to block this destination, just like we did in Smart View Tracker. And that's going to throw up the window that we've seen a couple of times before, where we're able to block this stuff indefinitely or just for a small amount of time. Now, 1 hour here is the default, so I'm going to click Enforce, and you'll notice that if I switch back to my command prompt here, there you can see my pings are now failing. So that's a useful option to be aware of right there. In fact, that's an option that's available in Smart View Monitor by itself, and it's called the Suspicious Activity Rule, which pretty much does what it sounds like. So at the top here, we're going to click Tools. The first option is Suspicious Activity Rules. And when we select that, it's going to open up this window that you see here that shows us all of the rules that we have in play at the moment. Now it does look like we don't have any, but that's not true. Firstly, we will need to select one of these two radio buttons. So to check if we do have any rules in effect, we'll select either of these buttons. The first one here is going to show us all rules on any of our gateways, and the second is going to let us choose a gateway from the drop-down list. Now either way, the result for me is going to be the same. If I choose to show rules only on this gateway, which is my LA gateway, my only gateway in fact, you're going to see that we do have one rule in effect, and that's the rule I just added, which was to drop any pings to google.com. Now if we want to stop this rule from blocking access to Google, we can select the rule here and then click Remove or Remove All if we happen to have more rules in this list that we want to get rid of. So we'll say yes to that. Alright, it's gone, and now if we go back to our command prompt here, there you can see our continuous ping, which is still going in the background. It's now working again because our gateway is now allowing this traffic out of our network. So these suspicious activity rules, they're pretty cool because they allow you as the checkpoint administrator to block traffic on the fly without having to go and create new rules and install a new policy to do it. Besides, sometimes a rule isn't what you want anyway. Sometimes you only want to stop doing something for now and then turn it back on shortly. And going through the hassle of creating rules and installing policies to prevent an issue where it might be time critical is not the best solution. For example, let's say we wanted to stop people from using BitTorrent in your network. Well, a rule in that case is the best choice, as it's really meant to be more of a permanent solution. But let's say, on the other hand, you've got an active connection that's sending data outside your network, such as a virus or a rogue employee, or maybe you've got the opposite problem. You've got a hacker who's actively trying to gain access to your network, and you can see these active attempts on certain ports or at certain targets. Well, then you can block it right here using these suspicious activity rules. So to do that, we'll just click the Add button, and then we could choose to apply this rule to all of our gateways or just to a specific one. We could target the source of the problem or the destination to either a single IP address or a network. We can then choose a protocol to block, or we could leave it at any to block everything that's coming or going from the place that we've specified above. And finally, down the bottom here, we can choose how long we want to enforce this block for. The default is to block for the next hour, but you can choose to block it for one of these other values if you like, or if you prefer, you can block up until a specific date and time. Now finally, if we click on the Advanced button, then you can also choose what action you want to take when traffic does meet these requirements that you've specified here. Now we could choose to either drop, or we could reject this traffic, and the difference between dropping traffic and rejecting traffic is that when we drop traffic, it just drops the traffic and it doesn't tell the sender that it's dropping it. Eventually, the connection's going to time out. On the other hand, when we reject traffic, this is going to send a packet back to the sender, telling them to clear off, in a matter of speaking. So that's suspicious activity rules. They're pretty simple to put into play, and they work immediately, stopping any suspicious activity. So in this video, we've talked about the CheckPoint NGXR65 firewall logging features and options, as well as how to use Smart View Monitor to understand what's going on with your CheckPoint infrastructure. Even though experienced CheckPoint administrators routinely dig into the consoles that we've looked at in this video, I'd recommend for those of you that are new to CheckPoint, really do take some time, spend some time here in these consoles to see what sort of information you can pull out of them. Because there will be a lot of information and it will serve you well throughout your CheckPoint security career to have a really good understanding of where these things are. That way you can know how your servers are running and what would be considered normal traffic and abnormal traffic. So we hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for watching.